Good evening, folks. Welcome back. This is your half-hour call. Half hour, please. Half hour.
Thank you, half hour. Hi, everyone. I'm Kurt Columbus. I'm the artistic director at Trinity Repertory Company. And with me this evening, I have three of the towering women of Trinity Rep. I have, yes, I do. I have Rachel Warren, I have Phyllis Kay, and I have Mia Ellis, three of our resident company members. I'm going to introduce them all to you. Mia Ellis is a 2012 graduate of Brown Trinity and a company member since 2013. I had forgotten that you've been with us that long, my dear, 2013. At Trinity Rep, she's been Sarah in Ragtime, Kamei in The Mountaintop. She's been Joan in The Melancholy Play, Laura in The Glass Menagerie, Esther in Intimate Apparel, among others. Welcome, Mia. Thanks for being here. Phyllis Kay. This is Phyllis Kay's 27th season with Trinity Repertory Company. And among her favorites are Lovey Ranevskaya in Cherry Orchard, the title character in The Hunchback of Seville, Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream, and of course, unforgettably as Linda Lohman in Death of a Salesman. Phyllis Kay, welcome. Rachel Warren started at Trinity Rep in 1999-2000, playing Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady. She's been a company member since 2002. She was Mother in Ragtime, Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Portia and Julius Caesar, Tilly in Melancholy Play, among others. Rachel, welcome. Thanks, beautiful ladies, for being here. I'm so happy to see all of you. And since we're going to sort of talk about the women in the theater and the history of Trinity Rep, I thought I would start with this little clip from George Brandt's Into the Breaches from a few seasons ago. Peter, if you wouldn't mind playing the scene from Into the Breaches. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Besides, I have a trick up my sleeve. Men! Oh, and bigger. Men! Oh, that's cute. Very good. Now, men, I have a little something to assist you in your transformation. Ida, have you prepared the cards? Celeste? Yes. Then kindly distribute at your leisure. What are you? Oh, dear. Holy moly. Is this really? They must feel the weight of manhood, madam. Make space for the testiculars. Take a moment. Adjust. Adjust. Good. Now walk, men. Walk. Good. Difference, yes? How do you feel?
I think mine might be a little tight. I'm feeling things that are probably less helpful.
Oh, God.
I don't know, maybe mine is too loose.
I'm not sure what you're all talking about. I guess mine must be just right. I want you to wear these 24 hours a day, man. Not you, my friend, especially her. Celeste? Oh, right. No, not her.
Come on, it's fun.
Your husband might not grasp the necessity. It's a stitch. I'm not. I wish I felt it more. I might need a bigger one.
I just couldn't resist.
Mm.
Resist.
Once they brought those cod pieces out, I could have been reciting the alphabet. You couldn't hear anything.
I know,
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
And Janice Duclos, who is a comic genius. Oh my God, it's just so good. So the reason that I wanted to bring together a show that had the three of you on it is because I was talking to a longtime supporter, and he was waxing poetic about what made Trinity Repertory Company so great. And he talked about the early years, the early days, and he said, and we had the Richards. We had Richard Neeland, Richard Kavanaugh, and Richard Jenkins, and all genius actors. But I thought, why doesn't he mention the Barbaras? Barbara Orson and Barbara Meek, who were there from the beginning and who had just as much to do with the development of Trinity Rep. Peter, do you have those slides? I want to show that's Barbara Orson in Awake and Sing, and then a beautiful picture of Dr. Meek in our town. Isn't she beautiful? Oh my God, it's just gorgeous. Thank you, Peter. And so, you know, we have those women, and I'd love to talk about them and what it was like to work with them. And Phyllis, did you ever work with Barbara Orson?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did. I did quite a few shows with Barbara. I was thinking though, when you said, why don't people talk about the Barbaras? I thought, are we really gonna go there? And I think part of the reason is that traditionally roles for women aren't so memorable as the roles that are written for men, historically anyway. I mean, there's lots of wonderful parts for women, but I think, you know, that might be one reason why they don't talk about the Barbaras. Everything I've ever seen either one of them do, though, I think everybody's sick of hearing me tell that story about that transformative moment for me when I watched Man for All Seasons. And Richard Neeland was astounding, but Barbara Orson broke my heart, you know, in that scene where she's trying to persuade him to sign. And it's just this gorgeous, gorgeous moment in Man for All Seasons. So I don't remember how, I know I was a teenager. I remember watching that scene and I was affected by what Richard Neeland did because he was an astounding actor. But for me, Barbara Orson got to the heart of that play because it was about family and that relationship with her husband. And I remember being a teenager thinking, oh, just sign it, just go home, you know, what does integrity mean, you know, to a teenager? So for me, it was very simple, but her performance in A Man for All Seasons was what I remember to this day. That's what I remember. And I was lucky enough to do quite a few shows with Barbara.
Yeah, with Dr. Meek.
Barbara Orson and Barbara Meek, both of them,
yeah. Yeah. Anything, Rachel, Mia, that you learned from Barbara Meek?
Oh my God. Barbara,
you go first. Yeah, Rachel.
Oh, okay. Are you sure? Barbara, I was intimidated by Barbara Meek for years. She was in the very first show I ever did at Trinity. She played Mrs. Higgins in My Fair Lady, and Phyllis was in that one too. We were in that together.
Oh yes.
She's just a queen. And I remember she would be wearing these gorgeous gowns and walk around the mezzanine, and I'd see her, she would just like just float. And she took me to task on that first show because, you know, I rehearsed and performed that play like I was, somebody was going to discover I didn't belong there any second. So I was very, very, shy, kind of and humble about it. At the end, in my final bow, Barbara took me aside after the first preview and she said, "That's not how you do it." Because I kind of came and I was like, thank you so much. And she's like, no, she's like, you do this and you do this and you do this, like, and she kind of forced me to take my space. She's like, this is how you do it, my girl. And she was tough and she was kind and she was professional. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who loved or understood the theater more. She was, my breath changed every time I talked around her. I don't know that I ever fully relaxed around Barbara Meek. I was in awe of her every day.
Yeah. Mia, what were you going to say, hon?
Oh, I was going to say that, you know, I luckily was able to be in one show with Barbara before she left all of us, you know, and that is a huge gift. And she was so tough, but I remember and I still do. I had such a great amount of respect for her. You know, for someone who's been with the company since the start, something like that, when you bring that much history into a room, you can do nothing but respect it and just be glad to be sharing the same space. And even though she had however so many years in the company, on my 1 year, you know, as a new company member when I was in intimate apparel, that being my first lead as a company member, she was still so incredibly supportive of me, you know, and she wanted to be there for whatever I needed. And if she ever felt like she wasn't doing something the way it should be done, she felt nervous about it and would check in with me about it because she did want to be there for me. And it was incredible to share space with her because she had so much wisdom and was so grounded. And it was nice too when she'd have those moments where she'd make us laugh in rehearsal as well because
Oh my
it's
God.
incredibly funny. So she
And
grew a lot,
naughty,
which is lovely.
right? She could be
Oh,
so
yeah.
naughty. She's
She's
so ridiculous. You know, the story that I tell our students all the time is it was one year during Christmas Carol, and she was playing Mrs. Bartlett, and I walked backstage, and she played that role a dozen times, and she was in her script. She was looking at her text, you know, at half hour, and I said, Barbara, don't you know the role by now? And she said, Lamekins, which is what she called me when she wasn't angry with me. She said, Lamekins, I can still be bad. And she said, I need to know that when I go out there that I know exactly what I'm doing. And just the consummate professional.
Yeah.
I mean, and so the thing that you're saying, and I know also from Barbara Orson's presence in the audience that she was just a gift. She would sit there in that front row and beam at everything that was going on. You know, talk about.
Barbara taught me a lot of things, but the best lesson is to stay in the play. And what you're describing, seeing her backstage, that was my instinct as an actor, to stay in the play, you know, and not be on my, I'm not going to call anybody out, but not to be on my cell phone or sending a text and then putting my phone down and then entering the play. Barbara would sit in a chair backstage and listen to the play.
Yeah.
And I do that too. And I can't imagine why anybody would want to do it any other way. I mean, if there's, you know, if I'm in one scene at the beginning of the show and one scene at the end of the play, I might not sit backstage for 3 hours. But most of the time, it's so instructive. And I want to tell young actors that you can learn so much from listening to the play. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Barbara taught me that.
Yeah, she was an amazing teacher. I'm going to play a clip just because if I talk too much about this, I'm going to start to cry, and I don't want to do that so early in the program. Peter, can we play the clip of Rachel singing from Ragtime? This is Never Go Back to Before from Ragtime. I want to share this and take us further in the conversation.
My feet were so solidly planted. You'd sail away, and I'd turn my back to the sea. I was content, a princess asleep and enchanted. If I had dreams, then I let you dream them for me. Back in the days when everything seemed so much clearer. Women who stared from the mirror.
Rachel
Well, that's the way
Warren.
you do that.
Yeah. Uh, so
I have to say something though, because I mentioned that Phyllis was in My Fair Lady with me when I came. A brilliant genius like Phyllis Kay in the ensemble of My Fair Lady. Like this is the thing, being the privilege of being a woman who gets to be an actor at Trinity Rep is that the performance that Phyllis was giving in the ensemble of My Fair Lady, like we all take our turns, sometimes you have the 11 o'clock number and sometimes you're in the ensemble and you learn what it means every second you're out there, what it's worth. And I sit at the feet of giants with Janice and Phyllis and Barbara Meek and Annie. Like, I mean, we learn, it is such a gift to be able to, it's been 20 years now that I've been around and I've gotten to, it has been a gift to imagine not only what's possible to do on stage as a female identifying actor, but also to be able to imagine a future for myself. To see somebody going ahead of me is like, I don't know, like I
Well,
feel
we
like,
learn from each other.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Mhm.
I think the reason that I wanted to play the ragtime clip is because it, for that sequence is taking something that people receive in a particular way, which we did with that whole show, with the part that Mia played, with the work that we did throughout the entire thing. It's received in a particular way, but because we're allowed to look at things anew, we can see it with new eyes, right? And I know, Rach, you and I found that unafraid of revealing, we found that was the moment where you started to pull off that dress, right? In rehearsal, that's a rehearsal moment. Do you know what I mean? And if you're not, when you talk about sitting at the feet of giants, one of the instructions is that all of the actors have a lot to bring to the process, right? I mean, I think, and Mia, you studied with Annie Scaria. You studied, there's a way in which that agency of the actor, and particularly with female identified actors in this business, that's a big deal, right?
It's huge. Annie Scaria, she is this force. She's like a wave. She's constantly moving and changing, and she takes up all this space. The first time I saw her perform was in Beautiful Creatures. And I remember her hair was so long in that play, and I just remember sort of feeling lifted by watching her sort of just move and be who she was in the play. And it is, like Rachel was saying, a gift, but just phenomenal to be able to have other women to look up to, other women who stand out on that stage and take that space and open their hearts and throw everything into it, and being able to watch them as well in rehearsal is also a huge gift. And I've had that privilege with Rachel as well. She throws it all out there, and so you can do nothing less than that. Phyllis, I hope our time is coming. And we have to get it together yet. But yeah, it's another level of learning, I would say. We are long out of school, all of us, but being in the space together, I think with all the women in the company, it opens that door to continue to learn and change and grow. That's a treasure.
So that's a perfect segue. Mia Ellis, thank you for giving me a perfect segue. I would like to play a clip now from the final scene of Death of a Salesman with Phyllis Kay, because this is talk about instruction about how to approach a classic role. So Peter, can you roll for us the clip from Death of a Salesman?
Forgive me, dear. I can't cry. I don't know what it is, but I can't cry. I don't understand it. Why did you ever do that? Help me, Willie. I can't cry. Seems to me you're just on another trip. I keep expecting you. I can't cry. Why did you do it? I search and search and I search and I can't understand it, Willie. I made the last payment on the house today. Today, dear. And there'll be nobody home. We're free and clear. We're free. We're free. We're free.
Um, so again, I wanted to play that because it feels to me, all three of you have played these iconic roles, right? Done Antigone, Laura in Glass Menagerie. You've all played these incredibly what are received canonical roles. And yet every time I've watched each of you do it in such a specific and personal way that I've never seen before. And, Phyllis, I've seen the end of that play 24 times, Life in the Theater. And I just, your interpretation just stands out to me as one of the great readings of Linda Lohman, because it's so you, right?
Well, the greatest thing about that play is, I don't know if I told you this story, when I was living in New York, 30 years ago, and I saw that production with Dustin Hoffman and Kate Reed and Malkovich. And I was, I would do I think it was standing room. You could see standing room for $10 or something. I saw the play a couple of times. And that graveyard scene, the graveside scene, that Linda's speech, that I saw it a couple of times, and every time it was, completely different. And as a young actor, I remember thinking, wow, what's going on there? Why is that so different? Why is it different from the last time I saw that play a couple of weeks ago? And when I became part of the cast and rehearsed it and got inside the story, I realized that it's because of the journey you take every night in that astounding play. I mean, the writing just holds you up, but every experience through those words each night was altered in some way, because the way you talk, my relationship to my family each night was somewhat different, and the events landed on me in a different way. And so by the time I got to that grave every night, it came out, I expressed it differently because of what had been visited upon me, if you will, for the the previous 2 hours. That's and I love that I got a beginning of that lesson when I was 25, and then more than 30 years later, I got to reap the benefit of that lesson in a New York theater. That makes me really happy.
Is that Mia and Rachel? Is that your experience in playing these kinds of canonical roles, and that it changes every night? I mean, Laura in Glass Menagerie, and you were in the middle of Brian Murda's Crazy, so it's completely different. But I mean, but there's something about that, right? That it did make it new every night.
I think there's always, I guess for me, a frame, and what occurs in the journey will change, every performance, but I always stay within the frame. So I always know that I will probably land in a certain vicinity about something. But that, yes, the pieces to get there will change. Because I always feel that there are certain things when you're playing a role that you are clocking, certain things that I think are necessary to land a certain way in order for certain other things to lock in. I do think I purposefully know that there are sort of benchmarks in how I travel through the character, and through the play. But there are things outside of those benchmarks that are, for me, I think I allow myself to have more freedom and allow them to change every night. So it's a mixture of, yes, things are set, but there's also we make room to play, but we also know the things that we'd like to touch, every night. At least that's how it works for me anyway.
Yeah, Rachel, same for you?
For me,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to mess up the quote, and I don't remember which of her books it's in, but Udo Hagen said this great thing about, as a young actor, I was like, there's this talk about like you don't want to peak too soon, right? In the process, and I was so afraid, like, oh, if I peak too soon, if I don't take the cake out of the oven at the right minute, you know what I mean? It'll just be crap. But but Udo Hagen said something in one of her books where she said how you do it is you go as deep as you can every time. And I'm paraphrasing, but that it's like I think about like we're wells, like we're a well. Like you do all the work in rehearsal to understand the text and understand the world that the director and all the actors and designers are creating. And you experiment a lot in that room, and you throw a lot of noodles at the wall. And but then ultimately in performance, I try to really trust that my well will not be completely dry. Like the bottom may be deeper some nights, the bottom may be shallower other nights, but you go as deep as you can every time. And that in and of itself, just because what happens to you during the day is so different. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And the other way, I had a teacher talk about like letting everything come to the party, right? There was another idea about like leave it all at the door of the theater. And I have found that, at least for me, I know some people can, I have a very hard time leaving everything at the door of the theater. So I instead try to say, like, how can that be a part of the party? How can my frustration today, my exhaustion today, my nervousness today be a part of the party? Because every character you ever play in a play is somehow nervous, excited, scared, afraid, and so like there is a way to weave it all in. So that's what I try to do. And then the other thing is really trust the brilliant people you're lucky enough to be around. Because if you're lucky enough to be standing across from Phyllis Kay or Mia Ellis, like you just look and there's something way more interesting going on in those women than anything you could ever make up in your own brain. And so like truly, like human beings are so fascinating. So that's the other piece of it, is like take your attention. My teacher said, put your attention on something more important than yourself.
Yeah.
Person opposite you, right?
You guys, it's like we rehearsed this, but we didn't. This is the first time we're talking about it, because actually the next scene I want to show is from The Mountaintop. It's a scene with Mia and Joe Wilson Jr., who's a very talented woman himself. And and
I'm going to tell him you said that.
yeah, please. I've certainly said it to him
Right now.
He's not hearing it for the first time. But the reason that I picked this particular clip, because there's this stunning clip that Mia has at the end where Kamei, you realize who Kamei really is. But I chose instead one of the early sequences between Martin Luther King and Kamei, and for the very reason that you're talking about, Rachel, because it seems like this is a play about Dr. King. And the surprise is what Mia Ellis is laying in throughout all of this. So Peter, can we please play the mountaintop clip? Yeah, that's all I need to say.
You all right?
Sure.
You need anything else before I go?
Actually, if you got a cigarette,
Cigarettes and coffee? That ain't a diet befitting of a preacher.
judge not and ye shall not be judged.
Honey, I hears that. I guess if you was at home, you'd be eating more
I
right.
suppose.
What you miss the most she made?
Her egg sandwiches?
I likes them too. Makes one every day for myself.
Oh, not too many women running around smoking Pall Malls. Impressive.
Quite. My daddy smoked Pall Malls. Said cools will kill you.
Well, have yourself one.
What?
Well, smoke one with me.
No, Preacher Kane. You about to have my boss up after me. I don't know what the rules is yet. Don't know where the dark corners in this place is to hide and smoke my Pall Malls. Don't even know which rooms to lay my head for a quick nap.
What about this one?
Last folk up in here was doing the hoochie coochie for pay. I wouldn't lay down in that bed if you paid me.
So what kind of rules does a little lady like you break?
None that involves no preacher, I tell you that.
Well, everybody got to break a rule every now and then.
Yes, sir, I agrees with you, but not tonight. Not tonight.
Have one with me. They're not going to come looking for
Well,
you.
you the one gonna get caught kidnapping me like this.
Just one. Till my friend come back with my pack.
Stunning. You're so beautiful, Mia Ellis. Again, what I love about that sequence is what we find out later, and I'm going to give things away. What we find out later is that Kamei is an angel and that she's been sent to Dr. King on his last night on Earth. And the sort of layers of power that I feel are in that written into the role, right? Katori Hall, playwright, also actor. I mean, it's in the role, but it's also in the playing of the role. I wonder what you think when you watch that, Mia.
Oh gosh, I think back on the rehearsal process and the conversations that I had with Kent Gash, who directed The Mountaintop, and Joe Wilson Jr. And I remember just clocking the unfolding of the storytelling and how each sort of chunk of the play, as we moved forward, slowly peeled back more and more information about Kamei that allowed Dr. King to be more vulnerable, that ultimately leads to me explaining who I am. And I think Katori Hall did a beautiful job of creating that path for Kamei, because it's tricky, because she comes into the room, Kamei comes in, and you don't know much about her, and you're not supposed to, and you spend most of the time thinking, what's going to happen? Why is she here? And the information that she slowly starts to reveal are things that she wouldn't know unless she had a very special, specific position in the grander scheme of things. It's one of those things that once she says why she's there, I remember being caught off guard by it too, because she just, it comes and you go, oh, wait a minute. So when she said that meant that, and this meant that, and you add it all up and you go, that's how we got here. And I remember Kent Gash telling me to not be afraid of the twists and turns in the show. And luckily, Kamei is this sort of free, sort of fluid and smooth, kind of creamy, fun personality that allowed me to sort of release the hold on wanting to sort of make things more, smooth. The transitions are not. She goes from place to place and you're following her and you're listening, and all of a sudden she does this magic thing with the cigarette and you go, oh, wait a minute.
Right.
she is,
Right.
she is someone special here to I guess light a path for Dr. King for his final moment. So it's great writing.
Yeah, great writing. And yeah, so and Phyllis, Rachel, I'm thinking about Phyllis, a Hunchback of Seville, and Charisse Castro Smith, and that character, that incredibly powerful character, who also is the character who has no power. You know, this is the interesting thing about the women writers that you all have played. Esther in Intimate Apparel, The Hunchback and Hunchback of Seville, Tilly in Melancholy Play. You know, here are these women writers who are also seeing power, seeing that balance of power and disempowerment, and it's fascinating to me. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that, Phyllis, Rachel. Am I just making stuff up now?
No, well, you know, what I was thinking about when you were talking was that I was thinking about what ties women together. And I know that you want to talk about women writers, and I applaud that. But I was thinking about one of the most powerful women that I got to play recently was Celeste in Into the Breaches, and that play happened to be written by a man. You know, I've lately started to think about roles that I've played because I have a little time on my hands. You know, and the themes, the similarities among the roles that I've played, and what unifies these women, and are there similarities among these great roles and the, you know, perhaps not so great roles, but just these women who show up and these characters in these plays. I've been spending the last, you know, several weeks thinking about that. It's not that I want to say that you always have to find the strength in a character. And I don't know if that's what where your guide is. But I feel like I'd like to think what unifies all the women that I've been lucky enough to play is just this enormous need to, it's not succeed, but it's just, I was talking to someone about it the other day. It's a transformative moment. And what else is theater except a series of transformative moments, hopefully. But I was thinking about all these women that I've played in terms of the transformative moments, whether it's a character with 3 lines or a character who's driving the play. I like to think about these powerful transformative moments, you know, among women, even people like the Hunchback of Seville, that you would not necessarily give any kind of power or agency to. In fact, that's what the play is about, that her diminished agency and what that does to her as a dramatic character. I don't know, miladies, I would make that suggestion to you. It's kind of an interesting exercise thinking about that unifying element in all the plays. If you find yourself with a spare moment or two in these next couple of weeks, it's been really enriching. I don't you know, I sound like I'm minimizing it. I'm not. It's such a cool thing to do. So I don't know if maybe you've already done, maybe I'm late to the party.
I don't know, Rachel, Mia, have you guys sat back and sort of considered your body of work? I mean, again, part of what, Phyllis, I love that you're suggesting, and this is why I talked about the Barbaras. You know, Barbara Meek was the consummate professional. And if you consider the body of her work, across the body of her work, you recognize her genius.
You know what, Kurt, it's not so much that I was going to, like a trip down memory lane, just sort of say, what have I done? And it wasn't like a summing up, but it was really to see the unifying element among the women the women's roles in plays. And if I could find a unifying element, and and not all of them would bend to that exercise, but it's an interesting exercise in and of itself. That's really more what I meant.
Great.
I
Go ahead,
think
Rachel.
that, yeah. I mean, I mean, that's fascinating, Phyllis. I think that that's right. I think when I think about just women in general, I think women are infinitely powerful creatures. And I think that whenever we're playing a woman on stage, it seems to me about that I find them all to be profoundly powerful. It's about who's been allowed, who's been held back, and who's been set free. And where is their power? How is it manifested? If it's been suppressed, where is it turned into sickness? Anger, lust, because it has to escape. It's a profound well of power. And then I think about what's their motor. Like Tilly's power in Melancholy Play and Sarah's and most of Sarah Ruhl's heroines are very different creatures than like a Lady M. Right? Which Philip played, but they're both powerful. Like Tilly is a tsunami of feeling. That's kind of who she is, and the world tells her that makes her weak.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so that's how I think about it.
Two things. One, there's a wonderful book called Women on the Edge that's about women's roles in Greek theater, edited by Jill Dolan, and it talks about how the women were used as sort of a central figure in Greek plays, written by men, performed by men, but they were used as these other beings to sort of explore what the limits of society were. Where do the society's limits sit? And you actually only find that by having someone who doesn't have the traditional mechanisms of power in their hands, right? And so I think of Esther in Intimate Apparel, or The Hunchback in The Hunchback of Seville, or Tilly, and how those characters are not given the traditional powerful levers of drama, but that in fact that makes them all the more compelling. And the second thing is, now I want to play the clip from Melancholy Play, because this is Tilly's song, and Tilly has come to, Joan and Frances, played by Becky Gibble and Mia Ellis, are a couple, and Tilly has come to have tea with them. And this is where we meet her. I mean, y'all, this is a play where Frances turns into an almond. I'm just, it's that. So this is the musical adaptation of Melancholy Play. Peter, can we play that clip now? Wonderful, wonderful.
Do you ever get the feeling when you wake up in the morning that you are in love, but you don't know with what?
Yes.
It's this feeling that you want to love strangers. You want to kiss the man in the post office, or the woman at the dry cleaners, or you want to wrap your arms around life itself, but you can't. And this feeling wells up, and there's nowhere to put this great happiness. And then you're floating, and then you're falling, and then you just become unbearably sad, and you have to go lie down on the couch.
Tilly, are you still in therapy? Tilly, are you still in therapy?
That's funny. People are always asking me, Tilly, are you still in therapy? I say something like I had a bad day, and they say, Tilly, are you still in therapy? I go to therapy. My therapist falls in love with me. I have to be careful.
How so?
not particularly smart. I'm not particularly beautiful, but I suffer so well. And when a stranger sees me cry, they see a river they haven't swum in, a river in a foreign country. So they take off their trousers and they jump in the water, and they take pictures with a waterproof camera, and then they dry themselves in the sun, but I'm still wet. Wait, am I acting weird? No. I'm sorry, can I lie down on your couch for a moment? I'm feeling sort of... Please do.
So beautiful. So beautiful. I want to take this moment to remind people, if you have questions, to put them in the Facebook Live comments, and we'll endeavor to answer them in the few minutes we have left. That it's right in the lyrics, right? That I'm not particularly smart, I'm not particularly beautiful, but
I suffer so well. And when a stranger sees me cry, they see a river they haven't swum in, a river in a foreign country.
Right?
So they take off their trousers and they jump in the water. Yeah, she's a genius. We are so lucky. We are so lucky.
Oh, I mean, you know, and directed by the brilliant Liesl Tommy. Mia, what were you you looked like you had something you wanted to add here.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know, Sarah Ruhl's writing is just, her imagination is exploded in everything that she does, which I think is important because as actors, I know that our imaginations are huge. And she was so incredible with us, you know, because she was with us for a few times throughout that process, but and was just an angel. And I just, her point of view is just so unique and at the same time real, because there are people who are like Tilly, who exist in the world, and we women are often very much like Tilly, and people take us for granted because they assume that just because we have emotions and feel lots of things that we aren't capable of anything other than that. But I think because of that, we are incredibly powerful and multifaceted because we do feel so much and therefore see so much and can understand all sides of things. So that was an incredible production to be a part of. And it was just 5 of us in the cast, which made it even better. It was tiny. And Rachel was just...
Well, and the therapist that Rachel mentions is Joe Wilson Jr. with an egregiously bad Italian accent. I mean, it's just hilarious. It's so adorable. We're going to see a clip at the end of the show that you'll see that in it. It's crazy. But Phyllis and Rachel, you were both in Dead Man's Cell Phone. We had the great good fortune of doing, I'm a huge Sarah Ruhl fan, as you all know. And I feel like as Sarah, Lynn Nottage, you know, Charisse Castro-Smith, these writers, these women are writing sort of unlike anything that we've seen in modern drama.
Jackie Sibley's Drury. Jackie.
Oh my God, Jackie Sibley's Drury, right, exactly. You know, and we're so lucky that they're all, Lauren Yee, that they're all writing for us. It's really great, but I do, Sarah's work is fascinating in the way that it takes the person, and you meet her and she's so gentle and kind and sweet, and then her main characters are that too, right?
Yeah.
Eurydice or oh golly, Janice's character in Cell Phone. Anyway, it's kind of remarkable. Is there anything else that I've missed, or I haven't gotten any questions off of Facebook yet, so.
Anything you want to know, Kurt?
What's that?
Anything you always want to ask me live? Go.
Well, so, I mean, in preparing for the show, and I was thinking about the work that I've done with all 3 of you, and I consider it literally to be some of the best work I've ever done is with the three of you. And I was thinking back, Phyllis, to Cabaret and to what we found with that show, which, you know, was unlike anything I'd ever worked. It was a huge leap forward for me because I'd loved musicals, I'd done musicals, but I'd never done one like that. And now I can't get enough of musicals.
That was fun. That was a fun one.
Yes, it was.
That was
We
good.
really,
That was a good collaboration.
Were you in school then, Mia?
I was. I saw it 3 times. I saw Cabaret 3 times. You both were, and it was because of the both of you. The roles for the women in that show, you made them shine. I mean, naturally the leads will shine anyway, but yes, I saw it 3 times. That's all I'm going to say. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's I used to go sneak in the back and watch. I'd leave my office and on the matinee and go and watch. And you know, same thing with Ragtime. I mean, there are only a few shows that are like that. Oh, we got a question. How are you continuing your craft without being in the theater right now? And I think people really do want to know that.
Ladies?
Well, you know, I teach. So I teach the grad students for Brown Trinity. So when the shows, when all the theaters were and everything else on the planet was shut down, somehow, you know, our classrooms weren't. Everything went virtual, and you know, teaching always. I think I learn more from I think it's a big, I learn more from my students than they learn from me, you know, because I see stuff that I'm like, I know I do, and it makes it visible to me and we're able to talk about it. It's such a gift. So, you know, as frustrating as teaching virtually has been, as our friend Angela Brazil, another towering woman of Trinity Rep, is fond of saying, it has its gifts, you know, it has its gifts. That challenges have their gifts, and that, you know, there are things in the teaching that are magnified, and that therefore, you know, I've also been able to see in my students, but also in myself. So that's been good. I mean, I will tell you, it's very I feel very like a fish out of water. But I read actually an essay. We were talking about Sarah Ruhl. She has a brilliant essay in her book, 100 Essays I Don't Have Time to Write, which she wrote after, you know, when she had her twins, and she's a mom of 3, and she was, I think, well, she says, you know, she wasn't sure if her life as a writer was over. And I turn to this essay a lot, because I actually, Sarah, if you're watching, I keep it in my bathroom, which I think you may not be offended by, because as a mother, sometimes the only place you have time to do anything on your own is in the bathroom. You lock the door for a minute. And Sarah wrote these brilliant, brilliant essays that you can read, and they're profound and inspiring. Anyway, in her first essay, she says that she had this, and I'm paraphrasing again, I don't have it in arm's reach, but that when you think that what you're doing is not about
the first essay,
it's the end, you know, that you can be tempted to think about this as you're writing she said you can't think of life as a distraction, that life is, yeah.
That it's called On Interruptions. I have it right. I can't believe I have it right here. Rachel Warren, I love you. And that, tempting as it may be for a writer who is also a parent, one must not think of life as an intrusion. At the end of the day, writing has very little to do with writing and much to do with life.
That's
and
right.
Life, by definition, is not an intrusion. Oh my God.
That's right. So I try for that. So on my good days, in my good moments during the pandemic quarantine, that's where I'm able to go and remind myself that this is going to add new floors to the well for all of us. There are new stories that are going to come out of this. I mean, it's so unfair, and the people who were affected by it, it's so, as everything else, like unfair and unbalanced. And but as Angela says, it has its gifts. There are insights to be gained. There are truths to be told. So I'm trying to pay attention and not get too angry and sad.
I love too that you managed to plug Sarah's book here, and
Please buy it. Everyone buy it. Everyone who's a parent should own it. Everyone who's an artist should own it. Everyone should own it.
It's so good.
I will say this has reinvigorated my love of theater, because as noble and absolutely, you know, wonderful and to be applauded as all the attempts are to keep theater going, I'm going to just be honest and tell you, it just highlights for me how one of these things is not like the other. And when you have something filmed, you have a filmed moment, or you have a filmed, attempt at theater, the contact is missing. Monologues work because I'm talking to you, but plays that are meant to be between, me and Rachel and Mia are supposed to be tearing it up in the same room, and the little squares don't quite, it just doesn't happen. It can't happen in the same way. So I know we will get through this, but I feel like just to Rachel's point, it's made me so grateful for the blessings that I do have and the blessings that we've all had in the theater and will have again. We'll absolutely have again.
That's great, Phyllis. I'm at the end of our hour. Our half-hour call is an hour every week, because there's so much. I want to say to the folks who are watching, thanks for tuning in. Please consider making a donation to Trinity Rep. We have this great matching challenge that's going on right now. Ken Siegel and Sarah Kelly every year are so incredibly generous, and they have a matching challenge that every dollar that you donate from now to the end of June will get matched by them. And it's just incredible. You can go to trinityrep.com/give. There'll be a little icon at the end of this. Thanks to three of my most favorite women on the planet. I love you and I miss you so much. I
love you too.
That I get to spend an hour with you. We're going to go out with a little end of melancholy play. Where it's after everybody's no longer an almond, or maybe they are still all almonds.
They're in the almond.
They're in the almond. They are all almonds. You're going to hear a lot about almonds. Music by Todd Almond, weirdly. Anyway, thank you all. Well, let's watch this last little clip. Peter, can you play it for us? Thanks again, everyone.
Someone's playing music.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Julian. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Excuse me, but would you mind telling us? Are we almonds? Do we look like almonds? Are we in Illinois?
Rhode Island.
Julian, could you play something happy?
I can try.
Joan! I can smell your hair! Oh, Francis!
Can an almond smell? Am I an almond?
Lorenzo! For the last time, we don't care if we're all nuts! All that matters is that we are together in the same place. There's music. And Frank, I adore you.
Oh, Tilly.
Oh, Frank.
Oh, Francis!
Joan!
Julian?